Hey there, Bethel Nation. It is Chad, and today we have, as always,
Cam.
and then to my right,
Brad.
we have Pastor Brad here. Look at this.
Yes.
Three.
We got
The triad.
the three
The beautiful.
musketeers.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't really think of
Three
a good
amigos.
threesome. Three amigos.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's probably going down a dangerous road. But we're happy that you're here with us this morning. I don't know when you're watching this. It could be evening. You could be watching this in bed. You could be watching it during your coffee. We're glad that you're with us today. We've been working our way through the Sermon on the Mount. We made our way to Matthew chapter 7.
Yes.
Where we're going to continue to talk about stuff. And I think we were going to give kind of like an overview of kind of where we're going in Matthew chapter 7, because Jesus kind of like starts to move in this pretty clear path, in my opinion.
Yeah. So as we've discussed all along, this was a cohesive sermon. It was what happened?
I punched the wall.
Now this was meant to be a sermon that was carefully laid out, and there's a connection between the three chapters, I guess is what I'm saying, chapters 5, 6, and 7. It's easy to read the Sermon on the Mount in chunks, and it looks like there's no harmony or interrelatedness to it, but it is a complete sermon. So it's best to look at it that way. And so in chapter 5, Jesus talked a lot about what a disciple looks like. Who are the blessed ones, or the blessed? And then he breaks that down into a little bit more detail in chapter 6. And in chapter 7, he's going to wrap up the Sermon on the Mount. And so in getting into chapter 7, which is where we pick up today, like we've been doing, we want to kind of look at this chapter in a context as a whole. So in chapter 7, Jesus begins talking about not judging, but then he jumps into the necessity of discernment. So it almost looks like there's some contradiction here. Mm-hmm. But in reality, I think what Jesus is trying to do here is to complete the sermon by helping the disciples understand that if they live the way that Jesus has taught and exemplified in chapters 5 and 6, that they are going to become a distinct community. The way they live their lives and the way they value things and people, following Christ is going to, in a sense, create a kind of a separateness. There'll be a distinction between how they're living and how the rest of the population and the Jewish leadership, how they were living and teaching. And so I think Jesus is trying to kind of set them up for success in understanding that as that separation occurs, that is not going to be a cause for self-righteousness. Jesus has been condemning self-righteousness all along in the religious leadership, and the last thing he would ever want is for his group or his followers, the church, the community of faith, to become self-righteous and start looking down on those who are not living the way that he's been teaching in chapters 5 and 6. So in one instance, he's going to talk about that we are not called to judge others, and yet we are to be discerning in the sense that there is a difference between how his followers will live and how those who reject the gospel message will live.
There's still an expectation for discipleship, right? Is what he's trying to say. There is an expectation for what you're going to do. It's not willy-nilly do whatever you want.
That's right. That's good. So just a little context to help us maybe understand chapter 7 a little bit and see it as one piece instead of disjointed separate pieces. All right, so we'll jump into chapter 7 and we're going to read verses 1 through 6. Mm-hmm. Do not judge so that you may not be judged, for with the judgment you make, you will be judged, and the measure you give will be the measure you get. Why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye, but do not notice the log in your own eye? Or how can you say to your neighbor, let me take the speck out of your eye, while the log is in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye. Do not give what is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before swine, or they will trample them underfoot and turn and maul you. So after Jesus has been describing what the life of discipleship looks like, now he says, do not judge. Do not judge others. And I guess there's a lot of different ways we could go with this, and maybe we'll bring that out in our different ways of looking at it here. But I think one way that's helpful to look at this is this idea of self-examination, that what Jesus is calling his followers to be are a people who can confess their sins. They recognize their sins and they confess their sins. Rather than pointing out the faults of others, they are a people who confess sin. And when we try to look at other people's faults, it often blinds us to our own. And it also may obscure the reality that the people we're pointing out faults to are under the same grace that we are. So the disciples are meant to be a confessing group of people. They confess that we are all in need of forgiveness, that we are all equally under grace, and that rather than pointing out other people's faults, we confess our own, at least first. And we confess our sins and recognize the forgiveness that Christ has already offered us and offers to our neighbor as well, especially when we think about pointing out their faults.
It's almost as if and I think we talked about this before, of the idea of getting your own house in order, right? Mm-hmm. Making sure that your house is in order before you go and you pick on your neighbor and trying to figure out how their house is disordered. There's the one word that's in here, the log in translation for the NRSV, the actual Greek word is beam. Which a log, I think of a log you throw on a fire.
Yeah.
A beam is something that is a part of the house. Like, I mean, that's like you put a beam in your house, which is going to tie it all the way back in a couple of days when we talk about that last passage of building a house. So the wordplay there that Jesus is using, and making sure that whatever you're looking for, inevitably you're going to find. So if you're looking out at and wanting to desire to find the fault in the other, you're going to find it. And so I think Jesus is cautioning us to not make that jump too quickly.
I don't think that Jesus is telling us not to be accountable to each other. I see the opposite. I think there's a call to accountability, but I think there's a call to be away from petty fault finding.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, I'm better than him because I'm doing this, or I saw what they taught the other day, and we're doing, I think it's the mentality that's behind. There's a different mentality behind fault finding and a mentality behind being accountable with someone else. And I think when we're accountable, to me, that presents more of a companionship, a walking together, rather than one walking in front of the other. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's definitely a call to accountability there. I don't think he's saying, well, just don't judge anybody else. I think, once your house is in order, like we talked about, then it's this walking alongside people and helping people.
Yeah, I think that could be some of the difference between judgment and discernment.
I agree.
Because when Jesus gets into, later on in the sermon, about identifying trees by their fruit, whether they're good or not.
Yeah.
So we know that Jesus is calling us to be a discerning body, but this kind of, like you said, nitpicking, judgmentalism.
Nitpicking, yeah.
And I know on a more personal level, I know that if somebody comes to me because they see something in me or my life that needs to be brought to my attention, if I have a relationship with that person, and that person has shared with me before their struggles and the things that their demons, and they come in, if I have that kind of relationship and that person has shown humility to me in the fact that they've shared with me their faults and their shortcomings and character flaws, I am so much more open and receptive to
100%.
Hearing what they say about, hey, I see something going on here that you may not be aware of, but whatever. I just know personally I'm more receptive to somebody who has been open and honest about their own issues.
I think we've been made in a way that I think there are relationships we have where we can speak into people's lives instead of just speaking at people, and I think there's a distinct difference.
Yeah, and the vulnerability, that's the word that comes out.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
so that you gotta have that vulnerability with each other, and it makes you far more likely to be able to receive that correction, if that's gonna happen. And if we're trying to formulate a community here, of Christ followers, then that they need to be vulnerable with each other. They need to be able to receive that from one another, as well as making sure that they are not going back to nitpicking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do y'all think about this?
I knew you were going to get there.
Yes. Do not give what is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before swine, or they will trample them underfoot and turn and maul you. That's ominous.
I like the way you said turn and maul you. Yeah.
Is that the dogs mauling or the swine? Like,
I don't know. I don't know which is worse. I think almost if a pig is mauling me, that might be even worse.
Well, it's what are the wild hogs? What are they called?
Wild hogs.
Wild hogs.
Yeah.
I heard they can be
Boars.
boars. Yeah.
Boars. I heard they can be pretty brutal. I've never encountered one. I've heard.
I think that this is kind of pointing, and we talked actually a pretty extensive amount of this before the video. I really think it's pointing to this idea of knowing your audience and knowing who you're talking to, and knowing that as he's talking to the disciples, that there will be this, there will be some people that just don't get it.
Yeah.
Or that you can't, you can't fix. I don't know. I've run into a lot of people in ministry that right off the bat that they're just not gonna click with it, and maybe it's time to
move on,
separate yourself, yeah,
or at least not let it drain you or pull you down.
Right.
I think maybe there's some recognition here by Jesus that hey, a lot of people aren't going to get this, or they're not going to accept it. They're not going to receive it. And when you run into that, don't let it pull you down. Just acknowledge it and move on. One thing that I read is that in some ways, everything that we talk about as far as Christ and the call to discipleship is a gift. And because we're going to get into this business about knock and search and receive. And so in some ways, grace and faith itself in Christ is a gift. And so we are people who have received that gift, and we accepted the gift.
Right.
And there may be some people out there that don't want a gift. They don't want the gift of forgiveness.
Yep.
They don't want the humility or the dependency on God that the gift, if you receive a gift, somebody's given you something.
Right.
And there's some humility to that.
Yeah.
But you have to receive it.
You have to receive it.
It'd be like giving you a package that you're not going to unwrap. That's just going to be sitting over there in the corner, wrapped up. And you can't enjoy that gift until you actually do something with it, right?
Yeah, but some people, we may offer that gift to someone else, and they're just not going to accept it.
Well, and you got to understand that gift giving in biblical time is reciprocal.
Right.
You give a gift, you're expecting a gift in return, and when that doesn't happen, then I think that's acknowledgement that,
So that's just in biblical time, right? That's not.
Well, I'm just saying, in biblical time, and that I have studied.
But I also think that some people still to this day.
Oh yeah.
Will give a gift, setting it up to go. Well, if I do this for this person now, then that means they're gonna have to come back.
They owe me.
They owe me.
Right? That's a whole other devotional time.
Yeah, that's a whole other.
Listen, you add a third person to this, we're gonna go some.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Our devotions are going to be a third longer now. So.
No, that's not my fault. That's not my fault.
Oh no, it's our fault. That's the problem.
Order a pizza and enjoy.
Well, with that being said,
yes,
I think it's time to tie it up.
Tie it up.
Absolutely.
Tie it up. Put a little bow on it. We've offered some ideas. Maybe you have some different ideas. Maybe there's something that we missed. We'd love to hear from you. You want to give a comment, tell us something great or not great about whatever. We'd love to have some discussion with you. We're thankful for an opportunity and a venue to connect with you And we wanted to give you that opportunity, and we're glad to have Brad with us
Yes,
today.
absolutely.
So as always, we're praying for you. We love you, and we'll see you next time.
We're out. Peace.